The Royal Commonwealth Society of Toronto is honored to have Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II as our patron. 2022 marks a very special year for Canada and the Commonwealth as we recognize Her Majesty's 70 years of distinguished service. Today, February the 6th, is a very solemn and a very special day. On the one hand, we remember King George VI, who died on February the 6th in Sandringham 70 years ago, and special because Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne. Let us begin this evening's events by remembering King George and paying tribute to him. I invite you to join me in viewing this video that takes us back to this very sad day 70 years ago.
Yesterday, he was among them at Sandringham. King to the rest of England and the Empire, but to them the squire, the kindly man who passed among them. And then...
This is London. It is with the greatest sorrow that we make the following announcement. It was announced from Sandringham at 10:45 today, February the 6th, 1952, that the King, who retired to rest last night in his usual health, passed peacefully away in his sleep early this morning.
The heart of the nation stops. The flags lower in tribute. Over the Mother of Parliaments, high over Big Ben, the flag is low as the news spreads. The King is dead. The King, our King, is no more with us. Swift from the press, the news flows to the farthest corners of our island. In our hearts, we feel this cannot be. Outside the Royal Exchange, they wait silenced, not knowing for what they wait. Here he was named king 15 years ago, as elsewhere in his capital. In Marlborough House, to the Queen, his mother, comes one more great sorrow. And in our sorrow, the great dominions join us.
Thank you very much. I would now call upon Reverend McRae, Chaplain of the Royal Commonwealth Society of Toronto, to pay brief tribute to King George. Reverend Arthur McRae.
I got it, Arthur.
70 years ago today, the 6th of February 1952, was a Wednesday. And I remember it well because I was there to serve at the early service at Christ Church Cathedral in Montreal, near where I lived. Before leaving, I went in to wake up my sister, but far from being asleep, she said, "The King is dead." And in short order, the CBC repeated the announcement, accompanied by solemn music. When I got to the cathedral, I told the priest that he would have to change the state prayer. And so the congregation heard the words, "Our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth." And as soon as the service ended, the people rushed up to the priest and asked, "Is the King dead?" That, in a sense, was my farewell to King George VI. King George had been a remarkable monarch. He had not expected to become king. He had not been prepared to ascend the throne. But nonetheless, he carried out his role faithfully. One of his challenges was to reestablish respect for his office as king and as head of the Commonwealth after the abdication crisis, which, because of his plain decency and the help of his queen, he did. Then, soon after he became king, the world was plunged into war, and we all know what suffering was rained down upon his people. Yet he stayed put and shared their trials for nearly 6 harrowing years. Then, after victory, he presided over the challenging post-war period. which so much changed in the world and in the Commonwealth. Finally, he laid down his burdens far earlier than we had hoped. He was not a spectacular king or a glorious king, but he was an admirable one, a true servant of his people. Let us pray. O God, we thank you for the life and witness of your servant, King George VI. May we in our generation mirror in our lives the virtues we had admired in his. And may we pass those virtues on to those who come after us. May his soul rest in peace.
Amen. Thank you very much, Reverend McCrave, for that very thoughtful, generous, and heartfelt tribute to King George. Let us now view a rare footage of events that also occurred on February the 6th, 1952.
Only a few days ago, the salute of the guns was a mark of rejoicing. Nairobi, capital of Kenya, heard them, firing their welcome to the royal visitors from Britain. This modern city, which only 50 years ago didn't exist at all, was to be the first stop in their Commonwealth tour, a tour that was to bring them in close contact with the many peoples of the British Commonwealth. 3 days later came the news from home, and the princess became queen, more than 4,000 miles from the capital of her realm. She left for London within the hour, and yesterday afternoon Her Majesty's ministers were waiting at London Airport to meet her on her return. The Duke of Gloucester, younger brother of King George, led the small group of people. With him were Mr. Churchill, Mr. Attlee, and Mr. Clement Davis. It was nearly dusk when the royal plane taxied to a standstill, arriving exactly on schedule after its 19-hour flight. It was a tragic homecoming, on the same spot where, a week ago, there had been a happy departure. In moving contrast to that occasion, there stepped down from the plane a figure in mourning. Elizabeth II, Queen of this realm and of all her other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. Having shaken hands with her ministers, the Queen moved across to thank the crew of the airliner which had brought Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh safely home again. From London Airport, the Queen and her husband drove off into London, in a car bearing the Sovereign's coat of arms. Within a few minutes of their arrival, they were on their way to Clarence House. Today, the morning after her return, the accession of Queen Elizabeth was proclaimed throughout Britain. In London, this was done, among other places, at the Royal Exchange, where the Clarenceux King of Arms read the proclamation.
For as it have pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late sovereign lord, King George VI, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown is solely and rightfully come to the high and mighty Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary. We, therefore, the lords spiritual and temporal of this realm, being here assisted with these of his late Majesty's Privy Council, with representatives of other members of the Commonwealth, with other principal gentlemen of quality, with the Lord Mayor, Aldermen and citizens of London, do now hereby with one voice and consent of tongue and heart publish and proclaim that the high and mighty Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen of this realm and of all her other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, to whom her lieges do acknowledge all faith and constant obedience with hearty and humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless the royal Princess Elizabeth II with long and happy years to reign over us. Given at St. James's Palace this 6th day of February in the year of our Lord, 1952. God save the Queen.
From Princess Elizabeth to Queen Elizabeth II. To mark Accession Day in Ontario, we are fortunate to have a video message from Her Honor Elizabeth Dowdeswell, Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, on the occasion of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's accession to the throne.
In my lifetime, Canada's development as a nation has been remarkable. This vast, rich and varied country has inspired its own and attracted many others by its adherence to certain values. Some are enshrined in law, but I should imagine just as many are simply found in the hearts of ordinary Canadians.
Today, across Ontario, Canada, and our Commonwealth, people are celebrating a truly historic anniversary. Her Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. 70 years of Her Majesty's service and dedication. Over the past 7 decades, Ontario has grown into a prosperous, diverse, and welcoming place, from 4 million citizens to over 14 million, to being a hub of education, industry, and culture. Sa Majesté a été à nos côtés, tout au long de notre parcours. And she remains with us today in this moment of both challenge and opportunity. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic has without question tested Ontarians, tested our resolve, our character, our resilience. So in this year of celebration and reflection, perhaps we might look to someone whose life is defined by service. For it's from this example that we might build an even stronger province and country for our children, that we might find reason for hope. So let us look to Canada's future with that same indomitable spirit, unwavering courage, and devotion to others that has always characterized Canada's Queen. Dieu sauve la reine. God save the Queen.
We have now come to that part of the evening where we will launch our virtual speaker series to mark Her Majesty's 70 years as Queen of Canada and head of the Commonwealth. Her Majesty has been a strong, resilient, forthright, thoughtful, and inspirational friend of the people of Canada and the Commonwealth. She has made 22 official tours in Canada, the most tours of any Commonwealth country, and visited many Canadian cities from coast to coast, where she has been welcomed with open arms and warm hearts as our Queen. We are very fortunate today to launch our inaugural Jubilee series with an eminent Canadian speaker, Mr. John Fraser. He will be speaking on the topic, No Fair Weather Friend, the Queen of Canada in Good Times and Bad. John Fraser is a distinguished Canadian journalist, writer, and academic. He is now the executive chair of the National News Media Council of Canada. As a journalist, Mr. Fraser has received multiple national awards and chaired the Canadian Journalism Foundation. Mr. Fraser is the recipient of many awards and citations, and in 2001 was named a member of the Order of Canada. For his professional lifetime in journalism, he was named to the Canadian News Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. John Fraser.
It is a great honor to give this opening salvo in the Royal Commonwealth Society of Toronto series of celebratory talks on the occasion of Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee. But I also have to say, it is passingly strange to be evoking a celebration of an unprecedented reign of 7 decades as a global pandemic continues, one that has actually found out your lecturer today here with the Omicron variant, although I'm on the mend. Interestingly, a pandemic is comprehensively egalitarian. It threatens sovereign and subject alike. It obscures much of the pageantry and theatrics of monarchy, and almost contrariwise, celebrates sagas of ordinary men and women, from the heroes in intensive care units all the way to shelf stalkers at no-name food emporiums. The solitary bridge between the two estates of sovereign and sovereign people is very simple and is all caught up in one word: duty. It is, of course, extraordinary that Queen Elizabeth has been our sovereign lady since the day her father, King George VI, died at Sandringham in 1952, 70 years ago exactly to this day. All the statistics are being trotted out all the time, the 22 visits and progresses to every province and territory in Canada, gracing each of them with her stoical presence. The number of prime ministers, 12, and still counting, she has personally welcomed to high office and endured. And then throw in well over, no kidding, 100 provincial premiers she's also dealt with directly and also endured one way or another. 100 premiers of Canada. Think about that for a moment. Endured is the key word here. The only power the Queen of Canada wields is symbolic and ceremonial, and it is all held together by an iron will never to be seen interfering in day-to-day politics and to do whatever this country, through its elected leaders, asks her to do. That is the point of continuing to hitch our constitutional star to the only international monarchy the world has, and one that has kept us out of constitutional mayhem, lo, these many years. It is a complicated business trying to explain the Canadian monarchy to non-Canadians. It's an even more complicated business trying to explain it to Canadians. It's not that many of us who actually get it. That Queen Elizabeth rules this country because we ask her to. The moment the Parliament of Ottawa and the 10 provincial legislatures decide our links to the Crown have had their day, that is also the day when Canada becomes a republic. And we can't say, even on this historic occasion, that such a turn of events could never happen. Our Queen's constancy has long been taken for granted. The vacillations of our own constancy are another matter altogether. And yet look how faithful she has been to all our better angels and even our lesser devils. There's not been a momentous national event that she has not graced us with her presence, from the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway to the patriation of the Canadian Constitution to the sesquicentennial of Confederation. My God, she's actually been our sovereign for nearly half the post-Confederation history of the country. She's also been here when some of us turned our backs on her because of ancient divisions we are still trying to resolve. It was during a flare-up of these divisions that she told us that she was glad to be here during difficult times and not only for the celebrations. I'm not just a fair weather friend, she said in 1990 on the eve of one of our daredevil referenda, and I'm glad to be here at a sensitive time. She also said that the will of the Canadian people to live together will often be tested, as it has been in the past and certainly will be in the future. In preparing this talk, it struck me forcibly the other day that I am one of increasingly few people alive today who remembers how strange it was to start singing God Save the Queen instead of God Save the King in grade school in 1952. Although I was only 9, I vividly recall the excitement of the coronation year later, not just because the Queen was being crowned, but because we could watch it on television. And our family was one of the 3 in the neighborhood which had a TV set bought specifically to watch the coronation, and which meant everyone and their brother crowded into our living room for the better part of the day. These days, I doubt very much if there are any school children who even know the words of what is still our official royal anthem, beyond perhaps the opening words, God Save the Queen. But in fact, those 4 words, God Save the Queen, are sufficient and cover all the territory. Ever since that coronation day 69 years ago, Queen Elizabeth has abided stoically by the oaths she made in Westminster Abbey. As a strict constitutional monarch, she went along with whatever way and manner the country wanted to deploy her. She has traveled high and low, far and wide. She has graced all our coins, survived in our paper currency only in the $20 bill, but it's the most familiar denomination these days, while they last. Remained, sometimes controversially, in the oath of citizenship New Canadians take, as well as in the oaths government ministers take before assuming their high offices. She went only to the places she was advised to go, assented through her vice-regal appointees only to the legislation she was required to approve, honored citizens she was expected to honor, and was altogether the very definition of a perfect and unobtrusive sovereign presence. If that doesn't mean much to some people, it's only because they have not realized how difficult it has been for any single human being to endure such consistency of service during such a prolonged period of extraordinary national and global change. Most of all, they've not pondered how lucky we have all been that she was simply always there throughout her long reign and spared us a mountain of constitutional grief trying to make another system work. That endurance has been her greatest gift to Canadians, one we have largely taken for granted and still take for granted. So it's good to pause at the beginning of the 4th Jubilee to offer gratitude for such stoical endurance and pay tribute for such steadfastness during the good and difficult times. Her own difficult times have been the stuff of headlines. And it has to be noted that just recently, she's had to deal with a troika of sadnesses, the chief being the death of her loyally stalwart companion for life, Prince Philip. And then there's the family, with a beloved son, Andrew, and an equally beloved grandson, Harry, both bolting in their own individual and certainly distinctive ways from her own steely notions of duty. There is no writ in heaven or on earth that guarantees a sovereign or any of her subjects a troublesome free life. And for me, one of the great services our Queen offers all of us is the evidence that periodic family dysfunction embraces us all, but she has been the one to show most clearly and publicly how to endure and transmute it. And she's done it the old-fashioned way by doing her duty and being true to her pledge of lifetime service all those years ago on her 21st birthday. Now, I would have to admit that I am guilty of being a romantic Canadian monarchist. Unlike our former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, who never thought that much about the monarchy one way or another until he held high office and then discovered how scary all the alternatives were, I have never taken it for granted, and I certainly never once thought that we might be better off as a republic. The crown has always seemed to me to be a golden thread running through our distinctive, strange, and worthy country. I accept that not everyone feels as I do, but still there are some significant signposts in this reign that Canadians should take note of, especially during this Jubilee year. For example, our Queen holds a unique relationship with the Indigenous nations of this country, one which will be explored in another lecture in this special Jubilee series. The only point I want to make here is that Canada constantly undervalues itself and the contributions its uniqueness offers the world. Out of the vortex of colonial expansion and exploitation between the 16th and 19th centuries, an extraordinary bond was created through treaties between the Crown and the Indigenous peoples of this land, and that still hold out the prospect of some kind of bonding reconciliation. Queen Elizabeth has always understood this, and on all of her 22 progresses around this country, it has been the recognition of Indigenous presence that has been foremost, and the treaty relationships with the Crown that largely kept that particular flame glowing until, rather late in the game, the rest of the country finally got it. The other thing that should also be addressed on this notable day is the ever-present speculation of what comes after, when this mighty force for good quits her mortal coil and her heir succeeds to the throne. If you put your faith in the random and often skewered nature of opinion poll questioning, you might think that there is no future. You could only think that, however, if you failed to take in that it is very rare for any elected Canadian government to get much more than 40% of the popular vote. You could only think that if you thought this fractious nation could actually agree on such a comprehensive constitutional change without a battle royal on what exactly would replace the Crown. As Prime Minister Harper realized in office, as I said, all the alternatives are very scary. And finally, you could only think that if you failed to see the irony in the gratitude and affection felt for Queen Elizabeth's lifetime of service to our constitutional safeguards, at the same time as disregarding completely the prospect of its continuation under her heir. For me, that is the logic of cloud cuckoo land. I don't say it couldn't happen, but I do say be careful what you pray for. In conclusion then, I feel like so many others who think as I do, that we have been lucky to have sailed through life in the 7 decades reign of Queen Elizabeth II. I also say with heartfelt conviction, directly to herself, thank you for that duty and service. Thank you for being an exemplar of calm reasonableness in a dramatically changing world. Thank you for keeping faith in our better angels and overlooking our occasional forgetfulness and ingratitude. And especially thank you for always living up to the solemn vows you made on your 21st birthday in 1947 and later in 1953 at your coronation. We look forward to your centenary on April the 21st, 2026. So I say, along with everyone else, I hope who's watching, long live Queen Elizabeth and God save the Queen indeed. And I think that gets a loud amen. And as well, a big thank you to the Royal Commonwealth Society of Toronto for inviting me to give this inaugural talk, and to the audience that tuned in. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fraser, for that insightful, thoughtful presentation. You mentioned consistency of service and the stability of the monarchy. You also alluded to the tremendous opportunity that Her Majesty has provided us as citizens of Canada to let her know how grateful we are for the service that she has rendered to us. While you, ladies and gentlemen, will put your thoughts together to ask our speaker a few questions, let me share with you what some eminent Canadians have remarked about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. The Right Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, addressing a dinner at Canada House after his first audience with Her Majesty at Buckingham Palace on November 25th, 2015, said, "The Queen was, of course, gracious and insightful with a unique and invaluable perspective. Her Majesty has been an important part of Canada's history, and I'm confident will remain an important part of our continued progress and our future." The Right Honorable Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada in the House of Commons on the 5th of April, 2006, stated, and I quote, "As this is my first speech in the House as Prime Minister, I would like to acknowledge and thank a number of people. First, I would like to pay tribute to our head of state, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose lifelong dedication to duty and self-sacrifice have been a source of inspiration and encouragement to the many countries that make up the Commonwealth and to the people of Canada. The Right Honorable Brian Mulroney, Prime Minister of Canada, on Canada Day, 1st July 1992, stated, and I quote, "The crown has symbolized a continuity in the values of decency, fairness, and equality before the law that have made this country great. And no sovereign has served her Canadian subjects with more grace, more concern, and more goodwill than Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen's sense of duty, her courage, warmth, and her honor are known and appreciated by all," end of quote. The Right Honorable Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, in his memoirs, stated, "I was always impressed not only by the grace she, Queen Elizabeth, displayed in public at all times, but by the wisdom she showed in private conversations." And then we have the hockey great Wayne Gretzky. In 2002, he said, and I quote, "Every country is different, and we grew up in this one with the royal family as part of our heritage," end of quote. The Honorable Jason Kenney, Secretary of State for Multiculturalism and Canadian Identity, speaking in the House of Commons, stated, "February 6th marks the anniversary of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's accession to the throne as Queen of Canada. For more than 50 years, Her Majesty has been a constant reminder of our heritage as a constitutional monarchy and our unique identity, of our origins and of our constant evolution." We will now open the floor for any questions that you might have of Mr. Fraser. If you wish to ask a question, please unmute yourself and ask the question. Can we have the first question, please?
This is good news.
Well, actually, it was a fabulous presentation. I think you covered so many aspects, and I really agree with you that Canadians do not understand the true nature of the constitutional monarchy that we have. And I think your reflection in your comments about its uniqueness as compared to any other part of the world really drives home the point of how important it is for us to know more about it. But let's reflect. Yes, go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say, there's not a problem, I think, in celebrating the Queen this year. People will do that because they recognize how amazing it is. There is a bigger question for Canadians, because this is our country and it is our constitution. She is our head of state, and we have a system in which we have a series of regents across the country, both at Rideau Hall and in the provincial legislature community, which is built on the notion of service from the crown. And we do not teach it in our schools. We just don't. And so it's not surprising that there is massive ignorance. I can just take advantage of this moment in the Jubilee to say it is something that I hope all teachers think about when they're with their kids. They should know how their country operates. They should know, it doesn't matter if they're Republican or monarchist, they should teach how our system actually works, so that even if they don't like it, they understand what it is that they don't want and what they would have to do to change it. That is something that has been absent, and I feel very strongly about.
John,
yes, go ahead. Go ahead, ask the question. Identify yourself and ask the question, please.
Okay, David Spence is my name. I'm from Vancouver Island and president of the Royal Commonwealth Society, Vancouver Island. I have one question and a comment. The one question is, not being as full of the monarchy as you are, Mr. Fraser, you mentioned 4 jubilees. Can you identify what those 4 jubilees are? My comment is
silver, golden, diamond, and the current one.
so gold, silver, diamond.
Silver, golden, diamond, and platinum.
Okay, thank you. The comment that I would like to make, which might lead to a question or a further comment from you, is that one of the projects which the Platinum Jubilee is promoting in the UK is the Queen's Green Canopy, whereby this is an opportunity to commemorate and celebrate the constancy and the longevity of the Queen's reign. It's sort of getting down to earth from the crown and the upper regions of the crown, and planting trees in memory and to commemorate who our Queen of Canada is, and how we can engage young people in understanding a bit about the monarchy. Do you have any comments about the Green Canopy and the planting of trees, which the Royal Commonwealth Society Vancouver Island is doing with a number of different projects?
I think it's a great idea. And I think there's also a number of other initiatives in Canada. For instance, all the vice-regal residences, I think, are having sort of gardens specially done. I think we'll hear more about that with another lecture later in the series from Nathan Tidrich. The next King of Canada is Mr. Green Canopy himself, you know, the Prince of Wales. Of course, I think that's a wonderful initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, and congratulations on the great work that your organization is doing out in BC. Great work. Do we have another question?
It's wonderful to do it in paradise.
Oh, Akash, nice to see you. Nice to see you, Akash. Go ahead and ask your question.
It's nice to see you too. It was a lovely talk, John, as I think we all knew it would be. My question for you is about, you touched on it, what happens next? In other words, at some point, there'll be a transition, and I think it's inevitable that since for almost all Canadians, this is the only monarch, this is the only head of state we've ever known. And I suspect that the passing of the torch is likely to unleash a national debate, or at least national reflection and conversations about the nature of our monarchy and the nature of our state. But as you've said, there's a tremendous shallowness in understanding about what that means. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that there are ways in anticipation of that day that either social organizations or the government or educational authorities, are there things that we can do to ensure that when that debate happens, and it's likely to happen very suddenly, that it will be a rational debate rather than one mired in speculation on speculation and misinformation on such a fundamental question for us as Canadians?
It's a very solid point, and it's one that's on many people's minds. This is what happens when you get to be 95. People are speculating. I mean, my God, the poor Queen just has to have a back spasm, and all the papers are going hysterical, anticipating she's going to make her century, I'm quite sure. But the point you make is incredibly valid. There is no God-given security in the succession, other than the system that we have, which is inherited, is the moment the Queen dies, is the very same moment that King Charles becomes the King of Canada. That won't stop the debate. It will get loud, and we have now through social media an amazing means for the most vituperative and also the most celebratory way of taking note of that. But the fact remains, there's certain constitutional realities that will still have to be dealt with, and what will happen through both knowledge and through ignorance is people will have to understand what is involved in the business, because the crown still will be there. It will remain. All the offices across the country of the lieutenant governors and the governor general who stand in for the Queen under our system will still be there and still operating. So there's not a click of fingers that can change things. And that's one thing that people don't understand. They saw in the Barbados, for example, that it just took a vote of parliament. Won't work here. It's different. And the other thing, when I've said, be careful what you pray for, we have a constitution that is still not accepted by one province in this country. And do you think, if it ever happened, for example, if 9 legislatures and the federal legislature all decided that we should become a republic, what do you think is the one province that probably won't go along with it? It will surprise everyone, but I suspect it will be Quebec, not because of great love for the monarchy, but because they want to make a point. That's what kind of country we have, and that's what kind of country we had the luck of having a constitutional monarchy to ride over some of it. But people need to see that and consider it. But I don't know if that's an answer necessarily to what you said. But what I was trying to say is that teachers would even just start preparing their students for the kind of system that we live under and anticipate what's going to happen. That would be a good start.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Do we have another question? Well, there being none, thank you, John, for an excellent presentation. You've been quite the driving force for the Royal Commonwealth Society to put on these Platinum Jubilee series, and I want to thank you on behalf of my colleagues. It's been splendid. Your lecture has been definitely enlightening, and we hope it will serve the basis for much celebration and knowledge as we move forward. So thank you again.
Thank you, Colin. And can I say the next 3 lectures are really going to be good. They're 3 wonderful speakers. And
thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you Canada's official logo for the Platinum Jubilee, released by Heritage Canada today. In presenting this logo, the Honorable Pablo Rodriguez, Minister of Canadian Heritage, today stated, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth is an icon, and for most Canadians, she is the only sovereign we have ever known. I know that this anniversary means a lot to many Canadians. That's why today I am so happy to launch the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. There is going to be something for everybody, and Canadians from coast to coast will be able to take part in these celebrations. End of quote. Let me remind you that our next speaker in the Platinum Jubilee series is the Honorable Hugh Segal, who will be speaking on March 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. The topic will be The Queen, a Champion of the Commonwealth. Please register at Eventbrite as you did for this event. Great speaker, many more speakers to come. Please tune in. We'd like to welcome you back. And finally, let me unveil a very special event celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. The Royal Commonwealth Society of Toronto will be hosting the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Gala on June 17th, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the Imperial Room at the Royal York Hotel. This event will be a black tie dinner with a royal, military, and patriotic theme. We will be welcoming a Commonwealth delegation from the United Kingdom, which will include the Deputy Speaker of the House of Lords, Lord Palmer, and his wife, Lady Palmer. Also attending will be members of the Commonwealth Diplomatic Corps and other distinguished Canadians. Seats are limited, and we hope you will join us. Please watch for the email with details for ticket sales in the next few days. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the evening's presentation by our distinguished inaugural guest speaker, Mr. John Fraser. I can assure you we have 3 more interesting speaker series. I want to thank you for your participation, and as I say goodnight to you on behalf of members of Council of the Royal Commonwealth Society of Toronto, I ask you to please rise as we play the Royal Anthem. very best. Take care. Thank you and God bless.